Welcome to the Dental Decoders podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Rogars, and I'm here to help you crack the code on all things dental operations. Each week, we dive into topics to help you overcome roadblocks, streamline operations, and reduce team burnout. Whether you're an owner, a practice manager, or a team member, this podcast is for you. Join us for insightful discussions, engaging interviews, and practical tips. So sit back and relax as we crack the code on all things dental operations together. Good morning, Decoders. I am so excited to be able to introduce you to Kirk Teachout today. Kirk is an undeniable wealth of knowledge, and I know that I say that all of the time, but I am really fortunate to know some really smart people, and I'm super excited to be able to share them with you. So Kirk is a business coach. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author. He also just launched his new program, The 7-Figure Dentist. And with that, he kind of unlocks the secrets to dental practice management and helps offices across the country do the same. He has a really diverse experience across multiple industries, which has earned him invaluable insights and tactics that ensure personal and professional growth. Kirk aims to empower the dental practice owners that he works with to realize similar successes as they've seen inside their practice. He has 4 pillars to his coaching style, which are culture, team, systems, and schedule, which he dives into for us inside of this episode. I am really pumped for you to hear this because the practical tips that he shared are not only super easy to implement, but incredibly impactful. If you take even one thing from this episode and introduce it inside your practice, I am very confident that you're going to see a huge shift inside your office. This episode is fantastic for anybody who is looking to refine the way their practice works, improve on either team culture or patient culture or efficient scheduling, or just work less and make more and help more patients. This episode is, like I said, packed full of tips, and I'm going to stop rambling about it so you can check it out. Welcome to this week's episode of the Dental Decoders podcast. I am so excited to have Kirk here. Kirk is a master of growing dental offices and producing as much as you can and providing as much value as you can while still having that work-life balance that we kind of all hope for. So I'm super excited for him to be able to share his wealth of knowledge with you all. Kirk, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brittany.
Yeah, so I've kind of rambled a little bit about what it is that you do. So why don't I have you introduce yourself to the audience so anyone who may not be familiar with what you're up to knows who you are.
Sure, of course. So 4.5 years ago, my wife was an associate, and she was like, I'm tired of associating as a dentist. I want to be able to have autonomy, to be able to make my own decisions, create the team I want, and really be able to pay off the student loans a lot faster than I can as an associate. So she was like, okay, the only way I can do that is through ownership. And so we looked and we found a place that we wanted to be. And she was like, will you help me? I was like, sure. Like, I'm not from the dental field. So, I just did a workshop too, where I started that workshop like, look, on paper, like, you probably wouldn't hire me just because like my background is from the music industry. I am not a dental career vet. I'm not from the dental field. And so me coming in as an outsider on paper maybe doesn't make sense. But I come from an industry where I've had to create raving fans through an experience on all fronts with marketing and all sorts of stuff in an industry that's so subjective, right? That only I love the music that I create or the art that I create. And so now to be able to bring all of that tactic to the dental field where everything is needed and or wanted, it's so easy to use those same tactics. Mm-hmm. So we bought the practice. 6 months after we bought the practice, COVID hit. So that was in September of 2019 when we bought. COVID 6 months later happened and we shut down for 2 months. But during those 2 months, while everybody thought the world was on fire, we were spending time with our kids. I was painting the office because it needed to be updated from the 70s. But, besides that, we were just spending time with the kids. And we were like, okay, we're doing what's right by our patients. We were trying to, give them information when we could, but we couldn't do anything. and we were, keeping our team like, hey, we're trying to get you guys unemployment and all sorts of stuff. But in that time, we realized that all of those things that as a business owner, you really need to do, but you don't make time for, well, now we had all the time. So to be able to sit down and figure out what we wanted, to see how spending time with our kids, because we have 4 kids and they're all young, 6 years old and under. So to be able to have the time to spend with them, but also to be able to have the money to be able to take them on trips and do things that we never got to do as kids. So we wanted almost the best of both worlds. But we sat down during those 2 months and we're like, okay, this is what we want. And this is how we want to do it. Now we just have to create the systems to be able to do that. And so that's what we did. And over a lot of trial and error over the last 4 years, we figured out a way to create a 7-figure practice, only working 3 days a week with a very small team, only doing bread and butter dentistry. And I get those questions like, oh, you guys are working 14-hour days. Like, no, we work 8:30 to 4:30 with an hour lunch. Sure, there are days that we go into lunch, but either way, like, it's not that crazy. Oh yeah, you guys must, do tons of big cases and tons of specialties and stuff. Like, no, my wife doesn't do implants. We only do crowns, bridges, restorative extractions, very few endo. We only did 8 aligner cases last year. So like nothing crazy. It's all just bread and butter dentistry. And it's all in how you train your team and the systems you have in place. And it seems counterintuitive to be able to work less and make more, but it really comes down to what I talk about all the time, which is Parkinson's law, that you allot and fill the time that you have allotted for the task. So as we all know, like in college, when we had that term paper due at the end of the semester, we're like, oh, we have 4.5 months to do this. Like, when did we wait to do it? The night before.
A week before at best.
Yeah, or maybe a week before. If you had a lot of other midterms or a lot of other things to do at the end of the semester. But for the most part, like we waited just a few days before, and yet we got it done. And so something I've been really focused on even before I was in the dental field was in the music industry. I would mix songs and I would have an hour timer in front of me. And most people would take, 7 days to mix a song, maybe a day, maybe 2, whatever. But I would put an hour timer, and sure, my first few songs were pretty terrible that I was mixing. But after repetition, I started getting faster and started getting better. And I could mix a whole album in a whole day and outpace everybody and therefore make more money because I could do more in a smaller amount of time. That was also quality. And so I've taken that tactic to the dental field now, where we focus on not necessarily, we do some high volume stuff, but just doing better quality dentistry faster. And when you do the same things over and over again, it gets a lot easier. So that's kind of where we are now and how we got to that point. And it really just comes down to training the team and getting efficient.
That's such a unique perspective on things. Like I'm in all the dental groups on Facebook, and you're always seeing like, how can I make more money and work less? Well, you got to learn implants. You got to do all on 4s. You got to do Invisalign cases all day, every day. So I love that your practice was able to master bread and butter, which is going to then attract even more potential patients, because not everybody needs an all on 4. So they can still come to your practice and still kind of meet that goal of you guys have to work less and be able to help more. So I think that's super unique, and I love that. One of the things that we were kind of talking about before we booked was that you have some pillars that you use to be able to create this type of atmosphere inside your practice. Can you tell us what those pillars are and how they kind of affect this model that you have inside your practice?
Sure. And those pillars kind of change a little bit depending on who I'm talking to, but for the most part, like, it comes down to your team culture. And it ebbs and flows. We struggle with our team too, just like everybody else, but your team culture and really putting emphasis on that is everything. Because if you don't have a good team culture and they're not working in unison with you as well, then that's going to affect the patient culture. But on the flip side, we also focus on patient culture. So even if our team culture is great, we have to focus on patient culture, meaning I fire patients. And I talk about this a lot. I fire patients a lot because it's important to have patients that, okay, want to be there, but
Mm-hmm.
two, that do the treatment that you present, that are not just coming in when their tooth hurts. Like, sure, we still have those patients and we're going to help those people, but you have to go to that office every single day. It's not something where you have to treat every single patient that calls your office. And once again, that's counterintuitive to what a lot of people feel, but you don't have to. And there's a legal and ethical way to do that
Mm-hmm.
in dismissing patients. But still, like, one of the things is patient culture. You've got to really educate your patients and get the patients on board with you, create a raving fan of you in your
Mm-hmm.
office. Like, it doesn't matter if you're super saturated with dentists, like 5 on your block, people come for you and your team. So whether that's your skill level or just your relationship with them, they come for you and your team. So creating an amazing team culture, creating an amazing patient culture, but then also creating an efficient schedule. And this is where it comes down to what I was talking about with Parkinson's law. Something that I do is, and I have yet to come across somebody I haven't been able to help, is getting their schedule so efficient that even with curveballs, they can hit their goals consistently. And like I said, if you keep doing the same things, ideally every single day, you're going to get quicker. You're going to be able to do better quality and do faster and better quality at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore your production goes up, your collections goes up, and that really allows you to determine whether you want to work 2, 3, 4 days, depending on what you're wanting to do. So that's mainly what I focus on. But I mean, there's tons of stuff from marketing all the way over. But creating that patient experience is that fourth pillar, really. Making sure that from the time the patient calls, that they are welcomed, talking up your providers, whether it's your hygienist, whether it's your doctors that are coming in. That's something that we say a lot. It's like, hey, John, you're going to love Dr. Lauren and also Lee, who's going to be cleaning your teeth. They're going to take really great care of you, and they're really excited to be able to help you this day at this time. All right. Every single touch point, we always talk up the providers. Handoffs in from the front to the back and from the back to the front are super important. Like, hey, Becky's going to help you in the back. She's really great. She's your assistant. She's going to take you to your, your operatory, and then when they're in the room, Becky's going to talk up Dr. Lauren or our associate, Dr. Layla. Like, hey, Dr. Lauren's going to take great care of you. She'll be in just a second. Same thing with the hygienist. My wife as the doctor, well, like, when she's done with the exam, she's like, okay, Lee's going to finish up here. She's going to take great care of you. She's going to walk out. And then coming back to the front from hygiene or the doctor's side, like, hey, Donna in the front's going to take great care of you. She's going to be able to get you those treatment plans and you can go from there. Okay. We look forward to seeing you soon. And then Donna, same thing in the front on the way out. She's like, thank you so much for choosing us today or for deciding to be here today, depending on the situation. And when new patients are in, we always ask them when they come to the front, how was your experience? Because it's one thing to ask for a Google review, but it's another thing to make them rethink about what just happened in the back.
Yes.
So before they walk out, we always ask new patients, how was your experience? Because we want to talk with them about it in the front. So that is the last thing that they have on their minds as they're walking out the door, which in turn leads to Google reviews.
110%. The handoff is one of the most underutilized tools, I think, in practices. And we kind of forget that because we're in the day-to-day and we're in the flow of doing things, like I got to get to my next patient, but you still have this one patient here and your job with them is not done yet. You want them to trust your practice enough to come back and to accept that treatment that we just talked about in that hygiene chair. So the handoff is something that is so important, and I speak to it all of the time. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, circling back to that patient experience piece, is there anything unique or crazy that you're doing to build that patient experience, or is it really just talking to them and building that relationship and building that trust?
Yeah, I mean, there are some unique things that we do that we always try new things and stuff. Like I work with a company called Zana, Sean Zayas, and he's awesome. Zana is great. And the way that that works is when a new patient comes in and signs up for our membership plan, not just a regular patient, but if they sign up for our membership plan, then 5 to 7 days after they come in, they get a customized toothbrush that has their name on it and our logo with like a care pack that says, "Hey, we appreciate you being part of our family now. This is a gift to you." And that's like little stuff on the back end that we could do. And any practice could do that. But that's not really what I think makes the difference. The main difference is the verbiage that you use to really get that patient to feel what you're doing. And once again, if your team culture is good, then your patient culture will follow. So if everybody's laughing and smiling and being positive with each other and complimenting each other and, complimenting, I know the first time we started doing this, we always try to find one thing to compliment with every patient that comes in, no matter who it is. There was this woman who came in the first day we started this several years ago, and she had these like bright, like bedazzled shoes on. And she probably got 5 compliments in a row from the exec, because that was the first thing that everybody saw. She was like, "Wow, I need to wear these shoes more often." I'm like, yeah. So like it works, but trying to like just small stuff, just find one thing to compliment them on, whether it's their blouse or the hat they're wearing, or maybe it's the like joke about the team that they have on their shirt or something. But find something, no matter what, one thing with every patient when they come in to talk to them about or compliment them on. So that way, when you're building that relationship, people like talking about themselves and people like feeling safe and also feeling like they're accepted, right? So if you're complimenting them on their shoes, like, oh, well, that starts a conversation. Like, well, where did you get those shoes? Why did you choose those shoes? So as far as something unique, like, I don't really think there is anything that has to be unique. Like, and that's kind of what I love about what I do, is because most of the things that I teach are low fulfillment. It's not like you have to spend $10,000 to do what I'm doing. Sure, like the toothbrushes cost money, but at the end of the day, like what I mainly focus on is foundational stuff that you don't have to spend money really at all. It's just about being a better positive person, creating a better positive environment. And it's more sweat equity of training your team to have the exact verbiage that you want, to always have a smile on your face. I know we were talking to our new front desk yesterday, and she was a hygienist for 17 years. She's now in the front desk because she wants that, which is a huge asset. But she was noticing, she was like, over the last 2 weeks since I've like started trying to smile all the time when I'm doing this, my mouth and my face is sore. I'm like, yeah, it does get that way. You're trying to make a better resting face. Nobody likes having a terrible resting face, but you have to work at it sometimes. Okay. So she was just like, yeah, I'm sore from constantly just trying to have a smile on my face. And I'm like, hey, that's great though. That's going to get better. It's going to be easier over time. But the fact that she is doing that is amazing. And that wants to do that, right? And that comes down to leadership. As Jocko Willink and Leif Babin say in Extreme Ownership, there are no bad teams, just bad leaders. And, we struggle with that all the time, trying to make sure we increase our leadership, increase our lid of leadership, and allowing our vision to be so big that our team's personal visions really fit up underneath it. So they are happy there and want to be there. But that's the reason why they're happy to work 3 days a week, 3.5 days a week when they're there on Thursday afternoon or Thursday mornings on half days.
I have so many little rabbit holes I want to go off of from that. So
yes,
first of all,
go ahead.
That quote is one of my favorites. It changed the entire trajectory of my career in a practice. I was 100% a manager and I was a micromanager. And then I read that quote and I was like, oh, okay, well, time to improve that. And that changed everything for me. So I love the serendipity of the fact that you just naturally brought that up. I also want to talk about your team is happy to be there. The compliment thing is so cool. It's such a small thing, but it makes such a huge impact. So I love that. So that's going to help build that patient culture. Now, if we start to look at efficient scheduling, which kind of goes in with those two pieces, are you using block scheduling? Do you have preset times for things, or how does that look? So you can kind of use those other two pieces that we've already discussed to build into that efficient scheduling part.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And yes, we do block schedule, but it's more of a hybrid block scheduling. So, I go through and try to, because once again, like it's all about goals. So if we have a goal, it doesn't matter what our goal is because ultimately that's an arbitrary number. There's nothing we can do to hit that unless we have a system to do that, as James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits. Right? So I've been quoting books all these times. So you need to read all these books.
We're in the same book club, I think. So.
Yes. So like as James Clear says, we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our systems. So we have to create systems to hit those goals. And if you physically, like if I set a goal of $50,000 a day, like if my schedule won't allow me to do that, unless I'm doing all on fours all day or full mouth rehabs, like there's no way I can do that with bread and butter dentistry. So what I do is I figure out where your goal is based off of your payroll being at 20%. It's very easy to calculate. You can talk to your accountant to try to figure what that is on average, right? It's not going to be like a fluctuating goal. If your goal is, say your goal is $10,000 a day with your payroll being at 20%. Well, we have to figure out how to arrange your schedule based off of how many ops you have and how many team members you have and whatnot to hit that $10,000. So I start by the most profitable and biggest procedures, which is crowns and bridges. I have a column for crowns and bridges, and I try to fit as many as I can during the day based off of your speed and what you can actually do. We do same day crowns. So I need to be able to do that based off our system of that workflow. So we have 4 crowns that can go on a day or bridges, depending on what that is. And then I have a second column that goes through filling the gaps. So I know while a crown is milling, there's a 45-minute gap that I have to be able to do something like restorative or an extraction or a couple fillings or a partial scan or something. Like there's something I can do to fill in the gaps while something is happening in the large column. And then finally, I have a column of assistant-driven stuff that, is ortho stuff, which is limiteds or anything like that, crown seats. So to be able to have them sectioned off like that and tell patients like, look, I'm sorry, I don't have an 8:30 for a root canal. Like the only time I can do that is at 10 o'clock. We choose that. We dictate our schedule. We don't allow patients to dictate our schedule because same thing, like if you went in for your appendix surgery, you just showed up when they told you to, right?
I showed up unannounced.
Yes, exactly. But if you had a different surgery that you had to do, they're like, okay, you need to be here at 5 a.m. on Thursday. You would be there. So what we do is we're like, okay, look, I have a 10 o'clock. Like we ask them what day is best for them. And every day looks the same. We have crowns at 8:30. We have root canals or crowns, depending on what we want. But that's when my wife likes to do root canals is at 10 o'clock. And she doesn't have anything beside it if we're doing root canals. So if you want a root canal, that's when you're coming. So we allow the patient to pick a day, but other than that, we tell them exactly what time they can come in. Same thing with limiteds. Like, look, we have one at 10 o'clock and at 1:30. It's like, if you're hurting, you're going to find a way to get there. So we dictate our schedule. And we also, obviously we have hygiene. We do it one on the hour, depending on if it's scaling root planning, we have 2 hours, different things. But we really focus on the schedule and how efficient it can be. And it takes the guesswork out of it. Because before we started doing this, me and the front desk, when I was up there, we were always like, I don't know where to put this. Like we have 27 fillings on this day and we're at $4,000. Like we got to find something like, well, yeah, you have 27 fillings that are $200 a piece. Like you can't hit your goals doing that. So you book it out. Okay. But like I said, it's kind of a hybrid block scheduling. So it is block scheduled, but if it's within 3 days and we're not to goal and somebody needs to get in, we're going to put them in blank spots. So it's not just like a hard, fast rule, like only a crown at 1:30. Like if it makes sense and it's the next day, we're going to book something there because something is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of an ebb and flow, and it's a dance, and every single doctor's different. I don't have one doctor that has the exact same schedule.
Yep.
So it's very customized, but every quarter we look at it like, okay, where are the bottlenecks? Where can we make this more efficient? What can we do to make this better? Like, okay, yeah, at 10 o'clock, we have 5 patients across the board. Like it gets really busy. Like, okay, well, we need to alleviate that somehow. Maybe we move the limited to 9:30. Like, like different things like that. And we adjust it and we move it. And based off of patient culture, we move it. Based off of the doctor, we move it. So it's a living, breathing machine.
I think that's a piece that offices forget when they introduce block scheduling in general, is that you do have to like revisit that. If your new patient numbers are tanking because you can only put new patients in at 1, like that should be an indicator that maybe 1 is not the best time for that. So having that patient culture in place first, so your patients are able to be more, they want to come to your office, so they'll be flexible with their schedule, is so important. And then reviewing that regularly to make sure that it does fit that patient culture in your practice. I think that's a piece that practices are forgetting about 100%.
Yeah.
This has been such a great conversation, Kirk. I'm so glad to have you here. I want to be respectful of your time. So before I ask you our final question, I would love to ask you, if anybody's listening to this episode and they want to connect with you outside of this and learn more from you, where can they find you?
Honestly, Instagram is the best and easiest way to get a hold of me. So getting on Instagram at Kirk Teachout, I'm sure you'll have them in the show notes. They can also grab a guide, the 7 steps to 7 figures, and how we created that 3-day program, really, or 3 days a week, making 7 figures, at the7figuredentist.com. You got to spell out 7. But other than that, yeah, just Instagram. I'm on there all the time talking to doctors.
Awesome. I will put the links in the show notes for sure. If you're listening, 100% have to grab that guide. That's such a great resource that you'll have access to now. So thank you for sharing that. Our final question that we ask at the end of every episode is, get ready, drum roll, please. What is your decoding moment or your secret code that had a huge impact inside your career or your life?
Oh, when my first mentor ever, and I didn't know he was a mentor at the time, but he came up to me. He saw something in me that was just something I didn't see in myself, but he saw something and he inspired me. But when we first met, he said, Kirk, and I didn't know this guy. I'd never met him before, but he was like, Kirk, he'd heard about me. He's like, you're going to fail. It's like, well, thank you. It's nice to meet you. But you need to learn how to fail faster, because through failure, you're going to succeed. And by chasing failure, you're going to fail faster and succeed faster than anybody else, and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. I would say that really changed the trajectory of like my mindset growing up with a single mom and 3 kids. Like me growing up, like I never knew more than, $13 an hour. Like that's all I knew. And so with him saying that, I started thinking and started looking and reaching out and trying to find things and read books and listen to podcasts and different things. It was, 15, 18 years ago now. But that moment really changed the full trajectory of where I am today as an entrepreneur, and really broadening my horizons and my limiting beliefs of, man, okay, well, this is what I need to do. I need to fail and allow myself to learn in all of these opportunities, which is what we do today.
I think that is so cool. Everybody is always so afraid to fail. But if you're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the things that you hear a lot is like, well, I sucked at that, so I tried something else, or I tried again. And that is just one of the biggest things that I feel people have to overcome if they want to keep pushing through in that entrepreneur path. So I can relate to that.
Definitely.
Thank you so much again for joining us today. This was a fantastic conversation, and I am so glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Dental Decoders podcast. We hope you took away a valuable piece of information. As always, don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to help us build our community of dental decoders. We look forward to seeing you for next week's episode.